This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Gotham City, like any other large metropolis, abounds in girls of all shapes and sizes. Debutantes, nurses, stenographers, and librarians.
Gotham City Library, Miss Gordon speaking.
Lopez hair removal. This is Jose.
Holy transformation. 1 minute, plain Barbara Gordon, librarian and Commissioner Gordon's daughter. And the next minute, something new has been added. Batgirl, modeled after her idol, Batman.
Holy apparition! No, Boy Wonder, I'm Batgirl. You are no longer alone, Capes Crusaders.
It took me 3 years to track down the Jade Gato, and 3 more to figure out how to steal it.
Funny, it only took me 10 minutes to figure out how to snatch it back. No matter how you do it, crime doesn't pay, girls.
Ad hoc est Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 174 for May MMXIX. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by...
What is Council of Geeks?
Well, despite the name, it's actually just one kind of pretentious guy on YouTube who rants at camera a lot and just goes on and on about things like Doctor Who and Marvel movies and Star Wars and...
I meant, what's the Council of Geeks podcast feed?
Oh, that. Well, it kind of depends on when it is you're looking at it.
What does that mean?
Well, it's been a lot of things at a lot of different times. Originally, it was just longer versions of roundtable talks that the guy who runs the thing used to have. It was the home of 90s Comics Retrial for a while.
Oh, I liked that show.
Yeah, but, then he did Executioner Song and it broke him, so he doesn't do that anymore either.
Oh.
There was Go Home Hollywood, You're Drunk.
Winner of the Relatively Geeky Network's award for Best New Podcast in 2017?
Yep, that's the one. That's over too. His co-host had a kid and, well, he didn't bother ever trying to find somebody else.
Oh. So what is it now?
Well, at the moment, it is home to See a Space Cowboy, where he is just going back through Cowboy Bebop and taking it one episode at a time, putting his thoughts up after not having seen the thing in about 15 years.
Okay. Well, what will it be after he's done with that?
Stick around and maybe you'll find out what's next, or catch up on the old stuff. It's still there.
This is a very strange promotion.
Yeah, well, he's a strange guy.
Batgirl the Oracle is also brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out MileHighComics.com. Well, it is always a privilege to have special guests on my show, and the great thing about doing a Barbara Gordon podcast is I get to interview wonderful people who write about her and write on that book. And I did not get to interview this guest at San Diego Comic-Con, but I heard from my friends just how excited she was, so I thought, okay, well, excitement's always good going into the book. So now, better late than never, as her tenure is coming to a close on Batgirl, we have Mairghread Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on.
It's a real pleasure.
Oh, yes. Hopefully you'll say that at the end of this episode, too. I was looking at your bio a little bit on your webpage, and I thought to myself, this, and I mean this with all the positivity and love in the world, this person is a nerd's nerd. Because just of the things that you're saying, there's this quote as well as semi-legit knowledge. You've got Star Wars Expanded Universe. I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Kill la Kill. Not many people mention Kill la Kill, and that's an anime that I really love. The Alien franchise. PS3, I just thought, if I were around this person and knew her in real life, I think we'd be good friends.
Yeah, it's a wonderful time to be a nerd. And I have I always like to say that if it's not at all useful, I probably know it.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, in the past couple years, the stigma of being a nerd has washed away, and it's certainly more celebrated now than it was even 10 years ago, where it was like, oh, why are you reading comics? Why are you a girl in the comic book store? Have you seen this change as well? Because you're really in the thick of things being a writer.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I went to college in New York, the first comic book store I went into, the owner followed me through the store. Just kind of, and then asked me why I was there. And
Sure.
I was like, well, I guess this isn't going to be my new comic book store. I'll have to find another. No, things have changed a lot. And, I definitely had that, here's some obscure references. I definitely had that last unicorn moment when I saw Force Awakens of like, why have you come to me now? But it's great. And it's really great as a writer to be there on that edge when, sort of this world that we've all loved is opening up to so many people, and seeing those new people coming to it and finding it and just, spreading the gospel of the bat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what a privilege you have to have such a great character to be able to write.
Oh yeah. Barbara Gordon is super cool.
So I want to talk about some of your origin stories. I always like to hear guests' comics origin stories. So what first got you into comics?
Oh, yeah. Well, I probably the cartoons. When I was little, I watched like Batman the Animated Series and 90s X-Men. And I actually went down to, I remember being in, it must have been like elementary school, and like going down to like the local comic book store. But it was the 90s and it was X-Men, so I had no idea what I was doing. And it was like issue 347. And like, I knew that I didn't know which one was what. And like, I knew they came out every week, but I didn't know that each issue only came out once a month. And of course, I'm like a little kid, so I was just painfully shy. So I ran away. And but then I started watching Sailor Moon, and I remember I got really into the manga, much to my mother's chagrin, because those things were like $10 a pop and you'd be done by the time you got home.
Sure.
But I did reread them a lot. And I finally circled back around to Western comics in high school, because my boyfriend, now husband, was very much into them. So the Marvel Ultimates universe totally worked and was a great jumping on point to get back into the sort of the swing of things with weekly floppies.
Very cool. Weekly floppies. What's your writing origin story? How did you find yourself getting into writing?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I really wanted to, I thought I would write action movies. And then I went to college to write movies, and they didn't want me to, they wanted me to write film, capital F, and not movies. But one of my professors said, well, you know, cartoons are just short action movies, right? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And so I moved out to Los Angeles and I started writing cartoons. I make it sound so easy, right? There was many years.
Sure.
You move out and they hand you a cartoon. It's great. You just knock on the pineapple at Nickelodeon and,
oh, wow.
But I really wanted to break into writing cartoons, and I had just started on a show called Transformers Prime. And I also really wanted to write comics, and I'd built up a bunch of different little samples and I'd shown them around, and, I'd gotten a little bit of traction, and finally IDW wanted to do a comic book that tied into the continuity of our show. And they had a writer, Mike Johnson, who offered to co-write with me because he knew I knew our show's continuity really well, and he knew I wanted to write comics. And so that was sort of my first big foot in the door.
Besides the obvious, how different is it writing for the screen and writing comics?
I always think of comics as the haiku of animation.
Okay.
You still want to go after these really powerful visuals. You know, you don't want to just have people sitting around talking to each other as much as you can help it. But at the same time, it's about learning to pull out the specific individual moments that suggest more action. Like when I first started writing, I would try and beat out the fights as if someone was going to draw the entire fight sequence, but the pacing is all wrong. It's about just finding those still images that suggest movement, as opposed to an animation where you're always trying to write the characters in motion from one thing to the next.
Very cool. So, of course, the most important question then is, what is your Batgirl origin story, whether it's Barbara Gordon or another Batgirl?
Well, I'm actually going to... I want you to know that I like all of the Batgirls.
Okay.
But I had a really soft spot because for Cassandra Cain.
Oh.
When I first started reading comics, Cassandra Cain was Batgirl, and Cassandra Cain, because of her dad, was from Detroit, and I grew up right outside Detroit. And so I really identified with Cassandra Cain, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cool, and she's so badass, and she's from Detroit and I'm from Detroit. And so, yeah, and I really loved the arc at that time about her, was really her sort of, being this master fighter and being sort of great at the bat part and not at the girl part, and sort of trying to figure out how to live a normal life. And as an awkward nerd teenager right outside of Detroit, that really appealed to me. So she was definitely sort of my number one Batgirl for a long time. She was actually the first character I ever cosplayed as, which is full face mask and everything, which is not easy to see out of.
I imagine not. Yeah, you just made one of my dearest friends, Donovan, very happy. That's his number one favorite character, so he'll be very excited to hear that.
But I knew Barbara from my first introduction to her was in the animated series, which I really liked her. I have to say I liked her a little bit more in sort of the original animated series, not the one where they kind of revamped it after because remember there was Batman, the animated series, and then Superman came out, and then there's kind of Batman and Superman.
Right.
Where she got that redesign.
Yes.
And everyone got a bit more, all the younger people especially got a bit more chibi, and she got a little more sassy, but I kind of liked her as sort of a little more earnest, So I was that's definitely always been sort of my foundation point for Barbara Gordon, is that sort of that first episode where she pretends to be Batman because, he won't, he won't show up to do something for Jim Gordon. So she's like, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. But
if you swear, I'll just bleep it out. So just know.
Okay,
that,
great.
Yeah, you've got whatever freedom you want.
So she's like, screw it. If Batman needs to show up, I'm going to show up as Batman. And I always really liked that.
So after writing Barbara for, over a year, how would you describe her as a character?
I think that Barbara is a character, in a lot of ways, I really feel like Barbara Gordon, more than anyone, is the true heir to Batman. Because I think that she's one of the few characters that I think really has his same grounded mindset, where I think Barbara has a lot of control issues, good and bad. I think she's the kind of person that wants to have a plan A, plan B, plan C. I think she's a really grounded character. But at the same time, I think when you're sort of that goal-oriented that long, it can be kind of a hollow life, And then actually that's one of the reasons why we sort of wanted to build up her life as Barbara Gordon, because I think it would be really, I don't know, is it weird to say that it seemed like I thought Babs needed some friends. It seemed
absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, she had friends in Burnside and everything like that, but in the comics, she'd been increasingly pulling more and more just into the Batgirl persona, and even her friends knew she was Batgirl. Mm-hmm. And I really liked it when I wanted her to be able to have a life just as Babs, instead of only as Batgirl.
Mm. So how did the opportunity arrive to actually write this Batgirl comic, and what directions did DC Editorial give you when you first started?
Well, this is actually, I auditioned for I auditioned at one point and then didn't get the job. And then I auditioned again, and it's probably about 4 months of work to try and convince them to let me write Babs. And I tried to really build a really personal story. They knew they wanted to go back to Gotham. They knew they wanted sort of a darker tone, which is great because that's where I like to live. And they wanted sort of to see if we could move somewhere between like Gail Simone's run and the Burnside run. So I built up off of that. And then that's good because that's where I kind of would have wanted to take Batgirl anyway. And then I had some personal experience that I felt like I was able to color her with and give a new perspective to things. And that's where we started the first arc. So,
what research did you do going into this on Barbara Gordon's character in the comics, at least?
I remember I did some kind of unusual research in the sense that I had to interview my mom. Because I knew that I wanted to do something. I forgot where the idea originally came from, but we knew it was early on that we were going to do something with, that was it. Sorry. I feel very inarticulate. Okay. I knew that Babs was a character who really relied on her mind and being able to think her way out of situations. And in the last arc, her eidetic memory had been really played up to like superpower level. Oh, yeah. And so I really wanted to knock her back on her heels. And so I was like, that's the place to go. And actually my mom had suffered from a brain tumor before I was born, and she had developed aphasia and short-term memory loss. And so with Babs, when, Grotesque attacks her implant, I remember trying to talk to my mother and really try and drill down with, what is it like to physically experience a seizure and to like experience, aphasia for you. And so we kind of, Babs ends up, if you read the issues, but Babs ends up actually kind of sort of having, I called it visual aphasia, where when she tries to remember what happens in the fight with Grotesque, you see sort of like the symbols keep getting mixed up and all the clues are there, but they're kind of scrambled. And like her line about like, she has a seizure and she's like, why is everyone on the, like, why is my dad upset? Like my dad never yells. Is actually like from like a story from my mom. And I remember trying to like talk to people, who had suffered. I was able to reach out to a consultant who uses a wheelchair to try and get an idea of like, what is that like? How is that perceived? I talked to people who are, there's been some traumatic injuries in my personal sphere. Sorry, I'm trying to be polite because I don't want to like drag other people's lives through this. But I tried to reach out to people who had gone through similar things that I felt Babs had gone through to try and piece together what their what had happened to them and what their mindset was, and then see if I could take all of that and sort of synthesize it and put myself in Babs's shoes. Now, that's not to say that, I guess because I wanted Babs to feel like a real person and not like an every person. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to portray her. I don't tend to write really aspirational stories. I tend to write really sort of this specific individual and how can they struggle to maintain, their moral compass in an increasingly gray situation. So I really needed to nail down as much as I could who specifically my version of Barbara Gordon, based on what I knew the events of her life were like who was she? How would we put her back on her heels, and how would she fight back? And so, so a lot of the research was that, because I wanted to nail that, to try and nail her mindset in life. And, her relationship with her dad becomes like a huge issue, and sort of get that right. And then, because that's just so much more important than, say the geography of Gotham.
Right. Yeah, I really respect that. I'm happy to hear that you went out and did that rather than just thinking this is how I imagine it would be. That's something I really respect from Chuck Dixon on his run in Birds of Prey, where he actually talked to people who were bound to wheelchairs and tried to get an idea how they would live their life. So that blows my mind. I'm so thankful for you that you went out and did that. I'm sure a lot of people also listening to this are like, wow, she did her legwork. So good on you.
Well, you try. I mean, look, I got to say, in all fairness, you can only do so much. You really, I'm sure there are things that we missed or we messed up or, we just weren't thinking about or something like that. But you got to try and, because it is comics and you only have so much time with the script, but it is important to me to at least do my level best. And I wanted to do my level best by this character because I know, for a long time, Babs was sort of the only game in town for nerd ladies. And so I want to do right by her.
Right. Thank you. Well, you're coming off of Hope Larson's run. How did you plan on making Batgirl your own? And now that you're at the end of your tenure, do you feel like you accomplished what you initially set out to do?
I mean, you could always do more. And there are definitely stories that you want to tell that get pushed or changed or shifted. I think the thing that I really liked was I really wanted to make Babs' relationship with her dad feel realistic and feel more modern. If you go back and read Batgirl Year One, it's great for its time, but like Jim Gordon has a line about I wouldn't want my daughter to become a cop, basically because girls shouldn't, because she's a girl.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't know that, I can see that Jim Gordon saying that, but I don't think 2019 Jim Gordon thinks that way. But then but at the same time, 2019 Jim Gordon still knows it's crazy dangerous to be a cop in Gotham City. 2019 Jim Gordon probably feels terrible that his daughter got shot by the Joker in his house. 2019 Jim Gordon is carrying around a lot of baggage and doesn't seem to be particularly great at talking about his feelings. And I just kind of wanted to see where sort of that went. And I really feel like we were able to establish what, at least to me, felt like a good relationship that wasn't a perfect relationship. And that Jim Gordon felt like a good dad without being necessarily the right kind of dad that Babs needed at every moment in her life.
Okay.
And that was really special to me because I really wanted to give her, I felt like there'd been a lot of really good writing about Babs and her viewpoint of the world, but I wanted her to feel like she really had a family and that we really got to feel her connection both with Jim and her brother and sort of how complicated that is to have that kind of, even if you take the Bat part out of it, that's a complicated, stressful family situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get more into that later.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, with issue 25, you got your feet wet because you wrote 2 of the, I think there were 4 total stories in that issue. Was that helpful? Was that just a good way as a writer to transition, not only from Hope Larson's run, but for you personally to transition into getting used to this character?
Well, I actually had written 26 before I wrote 25.
Oh, okay.
So I had already started to sort of get a feel for the character. I think it was really helpful in terms of crystallizing the tone, because I really wanted, one of the things that I think is a big deal for Babs, and one of the things that you'll sort of see crop up as a theme in the book over and over again, is the idea of disposable people. And, you know, who gets to get shot and then we don't see anything else about them, and the story moves onward. And why do we choose some people to get a whole, you know, rest of the issue or graphic novel or whatever it is to tell their story and not others, sort of. And I think that that's one of the interesting about Babs, is that Babs is really sort of anti-disposable people. Like Babs, I wanted her to feel like a character, because I think she is a character that more than anyone has a lot of follow through in the Bat family. There's a lot of, if you look back, I think through her history, I feel weird. I feel like I'm like writer explaining this to you, but obviously I feel like one of the, well,
Thank
I know
you for
you
that.
know.
Was a fun turn. Yes. No, but please, not everyone knows. That's why I do this show.
But I feel like one of the interesting things is if you look back through Batgirl's stories, she often has story arcs where she doesn't just save someone once, but that person actually gets integrated and stays in her network and in her friend circle and whatever, like, and sort of, you know, you see their progression as they go. And so I thought that was a really sort of unique characteristics to Babs, that she's not someone that just forgets about people. And so writing that issue 25, which is about sort of the aftermath of one of the issues that led into the Batman Catwoman wedding. Right. Basically, for those of you, I guess, quick sum up. The idea is that in one of the issues written in another comic, Joker like kills everyone at a wedding to attract Batman's attention. And our story is about the funeral for the groom of the wedding, who you find out that Batgirl had a relationship with, or I mean, not like a intimate relationship, but that she knew him from before, and sort of her perspective on the aftermath of this. So I felt like it was just a really nice chance to sort of crystallize what kind of stories we wanted to talk about, and also to, you know, to set up what kind of version of Babs we were going to write. Right.
Yeah. Well, final question that's in this intro, since he doesn't really pop up again. You did get to mention, at least in that crossover into the Batman Catwoman non-wedding, is Dick Grayson, of course. And I just wondered if you wanted to use Dick Grayson more, and it wasn't possible because of what happened to him, and now he's rich or whatever he is. Rick, I guess. Could you have used him more if you wanted to?
We had already planned out the first arc in advance of knowing that, before I came on. And I knew that I wouldn't want, I normally don't like to spotlight another character, until a bit into my run, because I feel like you want to, it's Batgirl. So I want to set up Batgirl. This is Batgirl's book. I don't want to become like Batgirl and Nightwing. Sure. So I hadn't really thought seriously about having a lot of Nightwing in the book. I will say that I'm personally Dick Babs forever. And
ma'am, I knew we'd be friends. Yes.
I love them. And I think that their theme song is Shut Up and Dance With Me. Oh. But although I will say I can see some really cool relationships otherwise, but I don't know. They're so perfect for each other. Although I would say, because my friend Jackson Collin wrote a great Nightwing run when he was, well, I guess not Nightwing, because he was with Spiral at the time. So I will admit to being a little intimidated to tackling Dick Grayson and making him as charming as he should be.
Oh boy. Well, if only. I guess we'll see what happens to them. I do feel like they're sort of a Ross and Rachel, that there'll always be this back and forth, and then in the end, they'll finally be together.
I know.
Okay. Well, today my little adventure was to actually read your entire run, which was actually really good because sometimes when you're doing issues a month, you lose little details. So reading everything in one sit down, like ties it all together, and it was an enjoyable ride, which is, I can't say that about every writer that's been on Batgirl, unfortunately. So I've split this up into your different arcs, and I'll say this now that if you can't answer something or you don't feel comfortable doing it, you know, like with DC and everything, you can absolutely just say so and we'll move on. So
Sure.
I don't think I ask anything too scandalous, so but just wanted to let you know that that is absolutely a possibility. So arc 1 was, of course, Art of the Crime with Grotesque returning, kind of. And you mentioned going back to this darker tone, and it was interesting, and it was actually one of the things that made me a little nervous because Barbara is arguably one of the lighter characters in the DC universe and definitely in the Batman family. So how were you able to, was it difficult to find this middle ground between the darkness that you said earlier is kind of your niche and the light that Barbara normally portrays?
It feels weird to say, I don't think so, because I'm sure someone out there is like, nah, you struggled. But no, I don't. I guess just because I wanted the book to take a darker tone didn't mean I wanted her necessarily to take a darker tone. Okay. She does get, I think, more intense and more focused because we're putting her in more intense situations. You know, I mean, when some guy's like paintbrushing people's blood, like,
right,
you can't be cracking too many jokes. But at the same time, I like to think that she still feels like a hopeful person, and I definitely didn't want her to become a grimdark character. I just wanted her to, especially since we were moving back into Gotham, I wanted it to feel like this is, you know, Gotham's dark, and Gotham is, you know, the big leagues. And I felt like, even though I really liked the Burnside run, Burnside itself can sort of feel a little safe, a little separated from the action. And so having her sort of move, you know, at first sort of temporarily and then permanently move back to Gotham was really about sort of, okay, well, now she's going to have to take, you know, you're leveling up. Like now you're back to being a small fish in a big pond. So it was about sort of taking that, you know, that really strong core that she developed in Burnside and really trying to see if it would survive sort of the blast furnace of Gotham.
Why grotesque? Why go back to this guy?
Oh, grotesque. Well, I really like Gail Simone. And so I thought it would be kind of funny to fridge a Gail Simone villain.
Wow.
And although it didn't occur to me that I was literally fridging him until like halfway, which technically that's not fridging because he's an antagonist, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
But I didn't realize that until I'd written it. And that my husband, who's a big comics nerd, was like, did you put him in a fridge? And I was like, well, yeah, because he's dead and you don't want it to smell. And he's like, did you put Gail Simone's bad guy in a fridge? And I was like, oh, I did. Well, I'm keeping it now. But I mean, there's a lot of practical reasons. He had powers that could be replicated without having abilities, the full face mask, but also like he just seems like kind of the kind of guy that you should want to kick. Like, and having someone who was sort of a more disposable villain and like someone we could take a new take on, I thought would be a really nice little Easter egg for people who'd been long-term Batgirl fans without people who were just coming to the book feeling like, oh my gosh, do I need to know a lot about this grotesque? You know, like, who is this guy?
Did you get any feedback from Gail Simone by any chance?
She's been very positive. And if she's just being polite, she is, more polite than I am. So,
okay.
No, she was very sweet. And when I found out I got the book, I reached out to her and was like, I hope I don't mess this up. She's like, I'm sure you'll do great. No, she's been very supportive and I'm so, so grateful.
Okay. Well, Gordons don't give up is a mantra that we see throughout this particular arc, and even later James Jr. will repeat it in issue 33. And my friends and I went to actually a Batman conference at Bowling Green State University recently, and Donovan, my friend, was doing research for his and went back to through Barbara's career, and it's been a while since I've been back there. But in Detective Comics 488, Jim actually says this, Gordons don't give up, to Babs after she fails to be reelected. And I wondered if this is just happenstance, or was this the inspiration for this mantra that we see?
What? No, I thought I came up with it.
Oh no! Now I feel bad that I've burst.
I felt so clever.
Oh.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Look, it's a very simple. It's alliterative. It's a good phrase. So you know what? Go back, edit this, and we'll just say that yes, it was a deep cut. Congratulations for finding it. I intended it all along.
People would not be surprised, honestly, because when you brought Cormorant out, I was like, whoa, this lady's doing her research. So I don't think they'd be surprised if you went back and, found that.
Yeah, although Cormorant was actually a suggestion by my editor.
Okay.
We were looking back, and Brittany loves Bronze Age Batgirl, and was able to point me to some really great resources in that area. Okay. In that era, I'd wanted to do Slash at some point too, from that same story arc.
True. Yep.
I didn't want to introduce them together because that felt hokey, but we ran out of time. Yeah. But hey, comics are. I'm sure Batgirl will be here, and I'll make my way back to Gotham at some point.
I hope so. Back to sort of the darkness, I actually skipped one. With the macabre crime scenes that you have, they're actually softened by the red coloring. And I wondered if this was intentional direction by you, or it was more a lead by Paul Pelletier, just to soften sort of the darkness and how gruesome it would be, so that you can't really tell necessarily what's blood, since everything's washed out with red.
It was definitely a concern from editorial. It's funny, editorial was like, get super dark. And I was like, let's paint in blood. And they're like, a little too dark. So that was sort of a concern. But I think actually our colorist, I think Jordy, came up with the idea of sort of making all the flashbacks red, all in different tones of red. Or maybe I'm totally forgetting it. I do have to admit that I have a 2-year-old now. So I have no memory of anything that's not essential. Okay. But I do know that the logic behind it was the idea that if we put everything in sort of tones of red, it wouldn't be as, obvious, that it wouldn't look as gory.
Yeah. Which I think works. So you are able to sort of toe that line of the darkness there, but not get so dark that we shouldn't have it in there because it's a Batgirl book. So I think it does a good job.
Yeah, no, I mean, the art team's been amazing, and I was so lucky to have Paul and Norm and Jordy and just, which I guess I still have them because we're still working on 36. But they've just been so amazing, and they've pushed me as a writer, and I started a whole new script style for Paul. So,
right.
It's been great. I feel like we've all sort of hopefully made each other level up.
Yeah. Speaking of that was something that I was going to mention in the second arc, but since you brought it up, you changed your writing style and you put this on Twitter. And I was pretty astounded by this, mainly because I feel like writers sort of just, whatever is working for them at the time they're doing it, but you realize that there was a better way for both of you. Have you received feedback? Has it been mostly positive in you doing this?
It's funny because I put it on Twitter because I thought it would be an interesting thing. I have a lot of friends who are comic reviewers, and I feel like they would have wanted to know, oh, you switch writing style. It'd be an interesting thing to see, hey, if this is the same team, the same character, this was written one way, this is written the other way, how does it look different? Just an interesting tidbit for them to know. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback in that particular from the outside, but from the inside, it really worked. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, it was sort of a thing where I wrote the first arc full script because that's how I was used to working. And Paul did such a great job. And he was talking about how, he was having to do like the motorcycle chases and things like that were a little out of his comfort zone. And he was really bringing the acting, because the one thing I was really terrified of, or that I'm always kind of terrified of, is that the characters won't have enough acting. Like my stories just don't function with a stoic face. And I asked him at the end of the arc, I was like, you did such a great job. Is there anything that I can do for you? And he mentioned that he'd gotten to work on one other project, Marvel style, or, well, I don't think DC likes me calling it Marvel style, but honestly, that's what you call it. And that had been really creatively fulfilling for him. And I was like, well, I've never done it, but let's give it a shot. And we started working on it, and there were some bumps along the way, but in general, I felt like it was just a super great moment of growth for both of us. I feel like his layouts got so much more interesting, and how the art interacted just panel to panel with itself to tell a story got really interesting. And then as a writer who tends to be kind of wordy, having to rewrite to fit this new panel dynamic really kind of forced me to, I think, pick and choose my words a lot more carefully and make sure that I wasn't just putting in balloon after balloon after balloon. Because, the ironic thing is that it was a lot more work for both of us. But I think we really did get a better product and a more integrated product by doing that. And we kept doing it. So hopefully people agree.
Yeah, no, as an outside opinion, and that particular issue, I guess the first of I had a co-host on, and we both agreed that we just really respected that you had done this and that you were willing to change something and just work better or more alongside, your artist creatively. So I just respect that you did that and put that out there and tried something that was out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's certainly out of my comfort zone. It's really hard. Well, because I'm so used to seeing everything in my mind and explaining out every little detail. And then like the first issue, like, you're just describing the broad strokes. And actually I would like super overwrite it, because I'd be like, well, this is what she's feeling, and this is how she feels about him. And so in this scene, their feelings shift from this to this to this. And Paul's like, I can't draw all of this. And I'm like, I know you can't draw all of this, but I want to make sure I have the right face. So I'm sure the first script was actually a real headache for him, but he was very sweet about it. But yeah, I just didn't, as soon as I saw what he could do, letting him take the reins, it was like, okay, great. You lose some of that control, but I think you gain a new perspective, and little things he'd add, like Batgirl throwing a remote at Cormac, like hitting him in the head with a remote control. Like, I loved that. Like, did not think of that at all. Did not have that at all. Some of the ways the panels would interact with each other, and she, like, the multi-shot of her parkouring over Gotham to work was great. I never remember to actually leave a splash page or like a big splash page, because I'm always like, more panels. But his splash pages are beautiful. And so it's funny. I like I said earlier, I try and think of comics as a haiku, but I really feel like this experience has taught me that no, I really can open them up more. There can be a thought as a comic book writer that more panels, more words equals more value. But I really think letting the art breathe, and now I'm starting to think that like the right amount of words in the right place, that synthesis makes real value in comics, and not just, regardless of how fast or slow you finish the book.
Right. Keeping in the art, do you, or even Paul, did you like the gray costume, or would you have gone back to the Burnside leather and leggings had you the choice?
Oh, I didn't really think about it, because I knew right off the bat that we were going to change the costume. I was just happy they let us hold off on changing the costume until we could find a place in the story for it to make sense. But I tend not to hypothetical too much in comics, so I do think that it's a fun design, and like especially the little backpack and like the logo becoming the straps. The one thing that sucks though is that I wish that we were more consistent early on. Some of the variant covers, it makes her look like she's got a domino mask instead of a full cowl. And her costume actually is that mask links up into a cowl into her ears, so her ears aren't just, because I've seen some of them, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful variant covers, and there's no way for them to know. But it's like, no, they're not just clipped to her head. Like, there is a cowl thing. I don't know why that matters to me, but it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look like her hair overwhelms the cowl on some of the covers.
Yeah. Well, because she's got the long red hair, you know. So in a lot of the shots you can't tell the difference. But I guess for cosplayers out there, if you're looking to build the current Batgirl costume, it is an interlocked mask and cowl.
Well, final question on this first arc. As you mentioned before, of course, Babs has some physical setbacks connected to her chip, and it's something that your predecessors also went to. And I just wondered, talking to you, what is it about this particular story point that makes it so compelling for writers? And if you'll forgive the pun, why won't DC just pull the trigger and take her legs again?
Oh, wow. Really? Pull the trigger?
Said forgive the pun.
That's got to be the a comic equivalent of no offense, but.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Look, I don't want to talk about will they, won't they, why they, won't they, about Oracle and the chair. That decision is made really clear to me that it was not going to happen in our run.
Okay.
It was really interesting to me, like I said, because I had kind of this personal angle to start with, where what would it be like to put that a little bit in jeopardy too. I kind of couldn't mess with the chip. I personally at the time was like, well, if we're messing with the chip in her mind, wouldn't that also mess with the rest of her? Like, unless we literally did some kind of I don't know. That was the choice that I made. But it was more of a tertiary thing of wanting to go after Babs's brain. And that would also be part of the package than trying to, I really tried to, especially in early press, be like, I'm not teasing the readers that she's going to go back to the chair. It's going to be Oracle. I think also I just wanted, it's no one's fault when sometimes you have to do really fast transitions, but when you do a really fast transition and a character goes from not being able to walk to sort of being able to walk really quickly, I felt like there was still story there and space there to talk about the emotions of that and what does that do to you psychologically, to your relationships when you quote unquote get fixed, because then it does cast a lot of other things. It's like, well, what do you mean? I'm fixed now, how did that mess with Babs? And I know that talking to people it's one of the hardest things to combat when you have, from my research, one of the hardest things to combat if you have any kind of disability is uncertainty. Will I be better tomorrow? Won't I be better tomorrow? It's kind of like if okay, I'm stable, or things are only going to get worse, or things are only going to get better. That is something that people can plan for. And especially if you're a plan-based individual, which I think Babs is, having I might or I might not. I don't know. It's that's hard to deal with. That's really that uncertainty. And so that was something that I thought was available for exploration. And of course and like I said, I want to put fixed in quotes because, that's sort of the point of the story is Babs, I don't want to feel like I needed to get fixed, but obviously I wasn't going to. But for her, especially because she had such a physical life, it's not like she was going to pass up on the opportunity to walk again.
Right.
But it makes a lot of complicated emotions because I don't think that, I'm sure initially it was really hard for her when she was in the chair because you don't get shot in the spine and assaulted by the Joker, and just brush that off the next day. That's not a thing, that's a violent, sudden traumatic injury. But I think she got to a place, and for a really long time in the comics, she was at a place where she was at peace with herself and she had peace with herself. And it's just interesting that when that situation changed, how does that change your point of view on everything that happened before it? Or how doesn't it? Or how does it change the way people talk about what happened before it? And what does that make you feel? And that was something I thought was worth I thought there were still stories there. And so I went after them.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, your second arc was called Old Enemies, and we already talked about Cormorant and where you got that idea. What made you want to use Jason Bard in this arc as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, I knew he was a character floating around, and I really liked the idea that Jason Bard, especially using a cane, is a very physical, immediate reminder of a time in Babs's life where she was really losing control. And like I said, I think Babs is a character all about control. And yes, I know that technically Red Hood is the one that dropped him the time that he, almost splatted, and that's what in theory lost. But she'd been dropping him off a building all night. So I don't think Babs makes that distinction.
Sure.
And I thought that was also, he's a character that in Batman Eternal goes through a real redemption arc. And we've been playing ever since the annual with this idea of redemption and who deserves redemption and who doesn't deserve this redemption. And so it became this really interesting thing of like what happens when Jason Bard shows up and he is trying to redeem himself. Batgirl's all about redemption. We've seen her she bought Poison Ivy's company to help her out, and she's offered a lot of characters chances at redemption, or at least chances at empathy. And so it's like, okay, but this is also the guy that tried to screw your dad over. This is the guy that got your dad put in prison. And also this guy is a walking reminder of the time you lost control, and your life is sort of all about keeping control. So I thought it was really nice. And it kind of makes things worse because as far as Jason Bard knows, of course, he doesn't know that Babs is Batgirl, but he does know that she's Jim Gordon's daughter. And so it's very important to that's the one problem with having a James and a Jason on the same book. It's very important to Jason to make good by Babs, which of course makes it harder for Babs because he's being extra nice to her, which is not what she wants. So that was just ended up being a really great dynamic of the more he's nice to her, the more guilty she feels. So the more she's mean to him, but she doesn't want to be mean to him, but the more she's mean to him, the more he's like, well, I just better be nicer and prove myself.
Right. Well, you just answered one of the questions I had, which was the fact that I have a sneaking suspicion that Jason actually knew she was Batgirl because of some of the weird stuff he did, like invite her to different events when clearly she shouldn't have been there as an intern, but you just told, or volunteer, but you just said that he doesn't. So I guess
I do not. In my mind, he doesn't know she's Batgirl. He's trying to make good by her because he gives her sort of this weird special treatment because he's trying to sort of make up for the fact that he screwed over her dad. And I think because she's her being with, and in an upcoming issue, we'll get into this more, but her working for Alejo, especially when Jim Gordon doesn't like Alejo, I think strikes a lot of chords with him about coming out of the shadows and being your own person and blah, 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 blah. So, but I don't think he's winking and nudging at her with Batgirl because ironically, I don't think he really cares about impressing Batgirl very much.
Okay. Which is very different from his Silver and Bronze Age appearances when they were partners. So,
yes, exactly.
Yep.
Well, I didn't say that we can't go in that direction.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm just starting in a place.
Okay. Whose side are you on in the Jason Batgirl debate regarding Cormorant's death in that particular issue?
Oh, well, remember that my job is to hurt fictional heroes for a living.
Okay.
So I am very
much
sick. I know. It really is awful. It's what do you do all day? Well, I think of ways to hurt Batgirl. We're not good people. But so I am very much with Jason that the practical solution is to shoot the guy. In fact, in the original script, there's no originally there wasn't a line where he was I'm going to kill her. Jason just, as soon as he has the shot, just took it.
Right.
But I think that DC didn't kind of want Jason to just shoot a dude. I wanted Jason to just shoot a dude, but they were probably right about that from a rating standpoint.
Okay.
I'm much on Jason's side. I will also say, though, as for myself, it's an extremely patronizing move to assume that Batgirl isn't going to be able to handle this situation. He's basically assuming that she's incompetent, right. Or at least that his judgment is more sound than hers. And hey, don't we all do that all the time?
Sure.
But I can definitely see where I think he made the right call, but he also made the jerk call, and also the murder call. So morally, I'm with Babs, but practically, I'm with him.
Okay. So perhaps the most important question that I'll ask this entire time is, how on earth has Barbara not been fired at Alejo's office?
That is true. She is kind of terrible at her job.
Yes.
Well, I will say that she has an eidetic memory, and she's a literal tech genius. Okay. So if she was running your IT department, I'm sure she could do that, like with one, and your social media. She could probably do that with one hand tied behind her back.
Okay.
So I think she skates out a lot better than in other people's eyes than she does in ours. I would also say, as cynical as it is, it looks very good to have the police commissioner's daughter volunteer for your campaign.
Okay.
So I want Alejo to be a good person, but we've seen that she is not immune to the optics of a situation. Mm-hmm. She's not a knight in shining armor. And I think that, especially when the police commissioner is like, I don't like you, having the police commissioner's daughter be like, I do like you, is a useful thing.
Mm. Is Izzy a secret villain?
Not in the issues that I'm going, not in my run.
Okay, I just wondered.
Although now I feel like I should text Cecil and be like, hey, heads up, make Izzy a secret villain.
Just some of her facial expressions and her in the background, and I just feel like there's something up with Izzy. But
well, I just wanted her, but also remember too is that we know that Batgirl is not a flaky, fly-by-night fair weather fan.
Sure.
But Izzy doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't know she's not showing up because she's Batgirl. As far as she knows, Babs is just, wandering in and out, the police commissioner's daughter, and being kind of a Swanee character.
Yeah.
I would have to say, if I were Izzy, I would not like Babs.
No. I mean, she gets annoyed at Jason inviting her to places she shouldn't be, and also, Barbara came up with the ridiculous excuse that she got sick with food poisoning from the shrimp puffs. But in my mind, I thought if she got sick, wouldn't everybody get sick from the shrimp puffs?
Yeah,
but Izzy just is like, okay.
I think at one version of the script, I was going to have her just be like, or Izzy was going to be like, you were just making out with one of the waiters. Like, first of all, you shouldn't be eating the damn shrimp puffs because it's not your event. Second of all, we all know that you were just making out with one of the waiters or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, that is a terrible excuse.
Yeah. Well, she got away with it, so I guess that's all that counts.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The one thing I did like about the relationship was I wanted Izzy to be a bit of an antagonist to Babs without being a bad guy. Like, they do have a moment when she thinks like, oh yeah, Babs was hiding because she has PTSD because there's a bunch of gunshots that just went off, like she's not heartless with Babs. And I just wanted them to, I feel like in comics, it's either, in a lot of media, if there are two girls, especially in a work environment, they're either besties for life instantly or they're at each other's throats constantly. And I kind of just wanted her to feel a little more real and that their friendship would grow over time.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make her, I like to think that Izzy's got a valid point, and it's complicated.
Yeah. And maybe she'll remain in Barbara's little cast of characters. We'll see.
I hope so. I like her.
Well, another important detail in Barbara's history, of course, is her term as a congresswoman. And were you at all leading towards maybe Barbara running for office herself, or was any of this storyline meant to reference her having done so in the past?
Well, it is one of the reasons, because we had we had talked about giving her, a life outside of Batgirl and a life outside of GCE, because she'd kind of moved away from Gordon Clean Energy a bit. And so we're trying to think like, librarian again or full-time student. I didn't want her to be a full-time student again because it felt a little young. Like, even though, heck, my sister's still going for her PhD. I know that can be a long road, but, and when I remembered and read up on like her being a congressperson, I was like, oh, well, she should work at a congressional thing. It seemed like a nice way of, I was like, nothing's more dangerous. There's nowhere more dangerous to be political than Gotham. Like, I imagine that's just it seemed like a great intersection for the two sides of her life and like a nice reference. And heck, yeah, sure. If I had had 10 years, would I have made Babs a congresswoman? Probably. Like, that would have been neat. But I kind of didn't think that I'd get 10 years. So I at least wanted to give her the idea of someday she could be.
Gotcha. Yeah, we were all, my little friend group and I were all hoping that maybe something would happen to Alejo and then Babs would step in and take that seat like she did for her father way back when.
Oh, yeah. So. Wow, then Izzy would be really pissed.
She sure would. Oh, then she'd have to work for Babs.
Staff, I had the IT.
Oh, man. Well, last question is about the Cormorant. He's got an interesting past with Barbara, which I'm sure you probably did your research on. Just the fact that he was actually the first person to shoot her, and he's also one of the reasons why she started to not trust herself and feel like it's time to lay down the cowl, and she ended up retiring in the 1988 special. But here we've got a character that's sort of wiped clean. Their history is not there. You did have the freedom to use that since Rebirth sort of allows you to dip back into that history. Did you have the option to bring that history intact and, they knew each other? Or were you told, like, this is just a new slate, tabula rasa with Cormorant?
I didn't even think about it. I knew I was going to have to reimagine the character just from, like, his original costume, and he kind of was going to need like a redesign from the ground up.
Sure.
And even like, why the heck is he called Cormorant?
Yeah.
But so I already figured he was going to have to get redesigned and retcon. It was important to me to just try and give him that mindset, and that I'd be able to leverage the fact that, the hardcore fans knew that, he was in the like Who Killed Batgirl arc.
Right.
So that he would seem like more of a threat in our arc. When really, of course, we know that someone was pulling his strings. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so I hadn't thought about like giving them like a long, detailed past. In fact, it was more important to me that he be a little bit more the leading edge for other villains. For the Terrible Trio.
Right.
And that he was going to be the start of that mystery. Than that he was going to be, the big bad himself. Because ultimately, whenever the big bad is a big ass dude in a suit with a gun, it's never quite as fun to just punch someone than to like dig down to whoever is pulling their strings.
Right. Yeah.
Especially because, hey, like, I think that Batgirl is fun when she's a detective. And so you got to give some mysteries.
Yes. That's actually something I've really appreciated in your run, and I just recently read, I guess it'd be 35, the Turbo Trio Part 1 that just came out, and I just thought, look at all this detectiving that she's got going on. So I really like that because it's been a long time. I feel like we don't get it a lot, so I'm appreciative when we get to see that.
It is hard to write. But no, I always feel like the Bats should be detectiving, as much as possible, as much as they will let me get away with it.
Yeah.
And I really wanted her, even though she has a really high-tech background and we use the high-tech, I wanted it to still feel like she's smart and she's solving the mystery by using her intellect to pull the pieces together, not just using technology to find the answer for her.
Gotcha. Well, on to our final arena, which arena it is, talking about James Sr. and Jr., focusing more on Jr., but I did have a couple questions just with her father. I always felt like this is the most stable relationship in the DCU, that of Barbara and her father, but you created some tension between the two. You talked a little bit about your plans for that and why, going into that and what their relationship is like. Will they be reconciled by the end of your run?
Not fully.
Okay.
Because reasons.
Okay, that's fine. I understand.
But I do think it would really surprise me if in the long term, I don't think Babs hates her dad. Like, he's doing his best, she's doing her best. It would surprise me in the long term if they didn't reconcile. Mm-hmm. I'd be sad as a fan.
Yeah.
But although, Cecil, if you're listening to this, you do not have to make me happy as a fan. You go twist that knife all you want, okay?
Do you think he was in the wrong with what he did in regards to James not telling her, number one? And number two, I thought that the even greater betrayal was the fact that he told James Jr. to go after Barbara when she ran down into the alley.
I think I don't know. And it's funny, when I was writing that, I was really thinking about, like I mentioned earlier that I've got a 2-year-old. And there's nothing like finally having a kid to make you realize that you have no idea what you're doing, but that you would absolutely die for them at like the drop of a hat. And so it really made me empathize with James, not James Gordon Sr. Made me empathize with Jim Gordon that, like, what would you do if you had 2 kids and you loved them and one of them was a monster, like, and hurt the other? Like, I just don't even know. There is as a writer, I think he made the wrong decision, but as a parent, I hope for our readers who were parents, it's like we really try to sell the idea that it's like there's no good option. You can't stop loving your kids. Like, you just can't. And so this was just sort of as a parent, I think he sort of, it's maybe not the smartest solution, but it was the simplest solution. Because how could you can't throw away your kids. You can't throw away your kids, but if you what are you going to do? Tell Babs that if it doesn't work out, like, that her brother's out there, or even if it does, that she's going to not feel safe. Like, ironically, it's another paternalistic decision, but when you're literally someone's father, it makes a lot more sense. And I think that him telling James to go after her was basically, it was the classic parent move of, like, you two have to reconcile.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, which again, possibly not the safest decision. He's definitely showing a lot of trust in James at that point, but we're trying.
Yeah. I will say that while I didn't like this scene, like what was happening in it, that it was really well choreographed, their confrontation in front of the cop car and how the coloring switched from red to blue, and like it zooms in on their face and then pulls out. It's just really well done, both with you and Paul working together.
Oh yeah, it's super cool. Oh my god, and and you're not supposed to like the scene, like.
I'm glad. Well, success.
Yes, yeah. No, we wrote it because, like, you're on Babs' side and he's a dick, like, and this was not the thing to do. And how could you not do this? And but I think we also, as the readers, have the advantage of being. I don't think that Jim Gordon thinks of his daughter as weak or anything like that, but Jim Gordon doesn't know his daughter is Batgirl. And I think if Jim Gordon knew his daughter was Batgirl, he would have a different opinion in that scene, or in that decision that he made, which was not in that scene, but was many scenes earlier, because it's very different from knowing, my kid's an adult and they're, intelligent and capable, and they've taken martial arts too. My kid is a vigilante who routinely goes out and fights crime. Like, that's just a different level of, I don't know any vigilantes, but that's a different level of things.
Do you think this is realistic, that Jim doesn't know his own daughter is Batgirl? Because you said you're a parent now, and you're going to watch your child grow up, and you think that if your child had that wide open mask and is right in front of you, that you wouldn't recognize?
I mean, it's better than a pair of glasses. So,
touche. Okay.
There are some things that you just, and I thought about it of, like, okay, do we not have them interact at all? because she's got such a small mask. Right. But I guess I wanted the story more, and I was like, there have been crazier costumes, like, so let's just go for it. Yep, it's definitely. Do you have to? I recognize that, yes, we were asking you to suspend a bit of disbelief. On the other hand, she's in a bat suit fighting crime, so you're already suspending a little bit of disbelief.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's get this done. It's James Jr. Batgirl writers like to go back to James Jr. What is it about this character that is so compelling and makes writers want to create more stories with him in it?
It's the classic sort of Cain and Abel story. Who's the rightful heir to Jim Gordon? He's got that, especially the way Elena draws him with the glasses flashing and that scar, and he's her, he's any chance I can do to have any walking failure of Babs. Like, I mean, she knifed him in the eye. Like, she sure did. That can't be a moment she's proud of. I don't know that she's exactly ashamed of it, but she's not proud of it. And I mean, and also she doesn't have a huge, completely independent rogues gallery where no one's derivative of, and no one's or a version of another villain, but someone who is so closely just tied to her. And I figured if I was going to write about the dad, I'd write about the brother too.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Would you say James Jr. is Barbara's arch nemesis?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I had my way, all the time.
Okay. Okay. And now I did say Barbara. I didn't say Batgirl.
Oh, it's true. Then no.
Okay. So you think
in
Batgirl's...
a weird way, I guess in a weird way, I think James loves his sister. I think James is a very damaged individual. And I think in a weird way, the worst thing that could ever happen to Babs would be James Jr. wanting to, like, quote unquote, help out. Like, that would just be terrible. I don't know what, like, let me make up for this looks like when your brother's, like, worse than Dexter.
Oh, yeah, that's probably accurate. Well, at least Dexter, wasn't he doing things for well, he was going after serial killers, wasn't he? Even though he himself was a serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, issue 33, want to spend just a couple questions on it. We're basically near the end here. It was unsettling in many regards, the strongest of which I would say would be Barbara's actions and her characterization there. Were you at all hesitant or worried in how you wrote her that fans might be upset?
Oh,
when you say "oh" like that, it makes me think that you didn't even consider it, and now I brought up a bad thing.
I know. No, I hope people weren't too upset. I guess it's just he's in my mind. It's like he's her Joker. Like he always pushes her to the edge. You know, if anyone is going to push her to the edge or make her lose control or get her right up to that line, it's him, you know? And I enjoy stressing Barbara Gordon out.
Yes, as we've established.
So I will point out that I don't think we have her do anything that Batman doesn't do fairly regularly.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
So it's much more aggressive. I wanted her to get much more aggressive than she normally gets to show that, like, James is special and James gets under her skin. But I didn't want her to, I wanted to keep her in the sort of, like, Bat moral sphere. So that you could rationalize and she could rationalize. And it's like, well, like I said, like, it's Batman does this kind of stuff. Maybe I'm not that bad. Maybe I am that bad. Like, that's way worse than I normally am. So, yeah.
I feel like Barbara should never get to the level of Batman, though. So I think that is, like...
Isn't it weird? It's weirdly more uncomfortable to watch Babs do it because she's Babs.
Right.
Like, because she doesn't go that far. Because she always thinks her way out of the problem. And so to see, for some reason, to see her use, like, brute intimidation is upsetting.
Right. Yeah, and especially the last one with the parole officer, basically an officer of the law, and then he's saying, please don't hurt me, and it snaps her out of it. That yikes, I think I went too far.
Yeah, well, and let's also give props to Elena for, that upside down tear was,
yes.
Oh my God,
yeah,
chef's kiss on that.
And everything, yep.
But yeah, no, she draws great messed up people. She draws such messed up people. And I feel terrible because I knew that she was great at that because I loved her in Suicide Risk. And so when we were writing the annual, I was like, can we get Elena? Can we get Elena? And so she must just think I'm crazy because I'm like, Elena's good at messed up people. So I'm going to give her some really messed up situations.
Oh my. Hopefully she put that on her resume that she can draw messed up people really well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's on her business card.
Oh, there you go. Well, there's a moment where James it's in their apartment. This is the scene I want to focus on here, where James he's humble. He's in this posture of supplication, but Batgirl just hits him. Can we be on her side on this?
Yeah, he stabbed her in the legs.
He sure did. Yep.
And also, I think in that moment, it's weird because I'm a writer, so I'm always going to play both sides of the fence. He is too emotionally naive to realize what he's doing, but he's basically kind of trying to cop out. It's not all better now because he feels bad. Like, nuts to him for feeling bad. She's felt bad this whole time. And now he's like, oh, I feel bad. Like, now you can't be mad. In a weird way, I don't think he intentionally is doing this. Intentionally, he's just trying to, all this feeling stuff is new for him. And he wants to build a bridge with his sister. But it's like, you got to realize there's a heck of a lot of water under that bridge, man.
Sure.
And going for the forgiveness angle in a weird way feels like he's trying to undercut her anger, as if her anger is not legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would have punched him.
Okay. There's also a moment where he feels like she's going to kill him, but he says that if it's going to happen, he wants Barbara to kill him and not Batgirl. And there's actually a silhouetted shot of Batgirl taking off her mask, implying consideration of his murder. Now, this was a bold, bold decision. So I would very much like you to explain your thought process here.
No.
What? You're not going to explain what you were thinking?
Sorry, man. It's too bold a decision.
Oh my heavens.
You have to decide yourself what she's thinking in that moment, how long that moment lasted. That's your box to open.
Of all the questions that you could deny answering, it's that one you chose. Okay, that's fair. Can James be redeemed? You talked about redemption before. Do you think this character, it's possible for him to be redeemed?
I hope not.
Interesting.
Magneto's a good guy half the time now, so I guess, what do you like in Transformers? Megatron became an Autobot. Oh. So, you never say never in comics, but I think he's a much more interesting character irredeemed. I think that especially I don't necessarily feel comfortable with him being redeemed via medication, especially so quickly. That's my only, that's just a personal thing with me, though. That's taster's choice on that. But more than anything, I just feel like there's just so much more story to be had with bad James than good James. So don't throw away that resource.
Gotcha. Well, the end of that particular issue does have sort of dark foreshadowing anyways, with the Batman who laughs in silhouette over him. So I guess there's always that potential. You left it open for future stories.
Yes.
Where do you see Babs and James going next if you were to keep writing?
Well, the important thing to say is that I'm not. So the political thing to say would be wherever DC decides to have them go next.
Okay.
I try not to get too much farther down the road than I have to on this kind of thing, because heck, at the very best, you never know, 20 years from now or something, we could write that story.
Yeah, that's true. You could come back. Well, to wrap up, of course, we're on your final arc with the Terrible Trio, and this is also connecting to the Cormorant and Alejo arc. Is there, well, can you tease anything, the final couple issues you've got coming out?
Oh, man. You get to finally find out what's in that backpack.
Oh, okay.
We finally revealed it. I've known what's in that backpack for so long.
Wow.
And we finally revealed it. And I'm like, it's such a silly thing because like even it's not like in the moment she's like, and now this is what's in it. But like I've just seen so many things where people are like, what is in the backpack? Why does she have that little backpack? What's that little bag? And I'm like, yes, we're gonna do it.
Well, it's not a compact and whipstick, is it?
It is. It is.
It's going back
the
to the
last
weapons
issue
pouch.
is exactly. Last issue is just a date.
Oh. With Jason.
I didn't say who. But no, it gets. I'm very happy with how the last arc is turning out because I get to do messed up things. There's a lot of great sort of super awkward moments because I love writing awkward moments. And yeah, I think hopefully the readers like it too.
If you were to continue, is there a story that you would really like to tell? If you were to circle back around, 10 years from now?
I really do think at a certain point, there's so many issues with James talking about how he's his father's son and trying to get his father's attention. I really do think that at some point there's got to be sort of a who's the rightful heir of Jim Gordon, like duke out between him and Babs. So that would be really interesting. And I don't know. I guess now that you've said it, her being in Congress would be kind of fun. At least seeing Batgirl goes to Washington.
Yes.
Although I always do feel like then it's funny because I just said like, look, the domino mask, like don't worry too much about it. But in my mind, I'm always like, if Batgirl shows up at Washington the same time that Babs is in Washington, is that too suspicious? But see, I don't have to write that. So
there you go. Yep. So finally, what are your plans for the future in writing, and how can fans continue to support you?
Oh, thanks. I am working on a creator-owned, which will hopefully get announced, I think, by June, they said. We'll see. And I'm very excited about it. I'm also writing a lot of television right now. Some very cool projects that will be coming out. It feels weird to say because it's animations. Yeah, it feels weird to say because like animation takes a couple of years. So ironically, if you guys would like to see more of my stuff, you can see the stuff I wrote a year and a half ago because Guardians of the Galaxy has come back for the second half of its animated season. And it is super fun. We did this arc. Especially if you guys are looking it up online, we did an arc called The Black Vortex where we got to do all the Guardians in different animation styles. And we did a riff with like Drax as like Spider-Man, but like old school, like Peter Parker, in like 4-color comics. That's really fun. And Gamora as like a sort of Disney princess look. It was a blast to work on.
Very cool. So, yeah, look for that and just look for your name on some comics so we can continue to support you.
Yeah, and you can always follow me on Twitter. My tag is just my name, at Mairghread Scott. And we also put out a monthly newsletter, which is late right now because my new job, but I'm totally going to post it as soon as I can.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much for taking time out of your motherhood and your wifehood and talking about Barbara and your run. And just know that I really enjoyed your run. There may have been times where I disagreed with what Barbara Gordon was doing, but the writing never let me down. And I appreciate that. I feel like you understood her character, which I can't say about every writer that I've read. So just thank you very much from a diehard Barbara Gordon fan.
You know, I got to say that is the best kind of thing as a writer to hear. If I can make you, even if you don't agree with the choices, feel like a character might make those choices, like that's awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. And thanks for staying up.
Oh, it's only 12:30. It's fine. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again.
Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Remember, you can send any questions or comments to batgirltheoracle@gmail.com. You can also find the show on Google Play and Stitcher. Like the show on Facebook or follow it on Twitter at BatgirlTheOracle, and follow the Batman Universe on Facebook and Twitter as well. Be sure to support the Batman Universe by subscribing to Patreon. Once again, thanks to Mile High Comics for sponsoring Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. And stay tuned later in the month for a regular episode featuring some Birds of Prey issues. But until then, fly on, Babs lovers.
Just plain Barbara Gordon, masquerading for a lark as she rides into the night on her special Batgirl cycle. Who knows? Is the dynamic duo destined to become the triumphant trio? Only time will tell us more about this dazzling daredoll.
I love a happy ending, don't you?